It's Platt, and today we get patriotic. That's next to Platt's Beer of the Week. So the particular beer we have today is another Octoberfest beer. It comes to us from the fine folks at Boston Beer Company. That's right, Samuel Adams Octoberfest. Oddly enough, doing a little research in this video, this is actually the first Boston Beer Company beer I've reviewed since I've started this Platt's Beer of the Week thing about a year ago. So I was surprised by that. So, as with all my other videos, I give you a little background on the brewery itself. The Boston Beer Company was founded in 1984 by a gentleman named Jim Koch. Most of you out there may know Jim Koch. At the time, he was a manufacturing consultant, I believe, or whatever, but he did come from a line of brewers and brewed beer at home, and eventually got the business plan together and created the Boston Beer Company in 1984. The very first beer they produced was the Sam Adams Boston Lager, which is still their flagship beer today. It's a 4.8%. Some people refer to it as an amber, some people refer to it as Vienna Lager. Just an amber colored lager. Actually, at the time, it was kind of a unique beer. There weren't a lot of Vienna lagers or ambers out there. I can't remember in the mid-'80s, we were drinking Miller Lite, Coors Light, Bud Light, and that was about it. Maybe Corona was starting to seek in. Heineken was for the kind of the yuppie crowd. So the Boston Lager was definitely a different beer when it was released at the time. He named the beer after Samuel Adams, who was one of the founding fathers and a brewer himself. I believe he was also the son of a brewer, if I remember right. So a multi-generational brewing family, so perfect name for a beer. And if you're going to name a beer after a patriot, might as well release it on Patriot Day weekend, and that's what he did in 1985. He released the Boston Lager that weekend. That weekend's huge in Boston. If you're not familiar with it, that's when they generally run the Boston Marathon. They generally, that Monday, have an early Sox game, either 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning, which is early baseball game. Just a big weekend in Boston. Perfect weekend to release such beer. 6 weeks after that Patriot Day weekend, the Boston Lager is named Best Beer in America at the Great American Beer Fest, and the rest, they would say, is history. However, the Boston Beer Company has not had its entire existence without some controversy. And the controversy kind of started at the very beginning. Jim Koch, when he started the company, did not have a Boston Beer Company brewery. He used what's called contract brewing, and I'll go into a little bit later on contract brewing, but he used contract brewers to produce the beers. I believe he originally had brewers in Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and Portland producing his beer. I believe he used the same brewery that Iron City beer is made by. But this right there kind of set off flags. People like, hey, you're not making, your own beer per se. Eventually, Boston Beer Company did build a research and development brewery in Boston, and it's where you do brewery tours. They have a visitor center, a lot of marketing as far as video shoot stuff like that get done there. And again, that kind of increased the controversy more because some of the older Samuel Adams videos, you kind of got the vibe that everything was made in Boston when the actual truth was made other places, that the beers you were drinking weren't coming from that brewery in Boston. That was the test brewery. So again, that stirred up a lot of controversy. Is it really craft? Is it, if it's a contract brewer? We were even having those conversations, now 30 years ago. Besides the full line of Samuel Adams products, the Boston Beer Company also owns Twisted Tea, Angry Orchard cider, and then they have the Truly line of carbonated beverages. Probably the biggest news to hit Samuel Adams or the Boston Beer Company the last couple of years is their merger with Dogfish Head. Sam Calagione and his wife became major stockholders in the Boston Beer Company, and in the agreement it came out that Sam Calagione will eventually take over operations of the company when Jim Koch steps down. So they already have kind of the next generation planned, and I hope that bringing Sam on, because he is so respected in the craft brew community, will kind of calm down some of the angst pointed toward Boston Beer Company every once in a while. The Boston Beer Company, last but not least, is the fourth largest brewer in America, and that's probably the biggest beef I think someone should have with whether they should be considered craft or not. They are the fourth largest brewer in America. They now have this diversified product line. But as far as, if a beer's made at another brewery or not, I'm less hung up on that. Again, we'll discuss that in a little bit. Well, before we try this beer, though, let's check out the stats. Alright, so I thought today, since we are trying a beer from the Boston Beer Company, I thought today would be the perfect time to go over the topic of contract brewing. What is it? Why would you use it? And is it a good or bad thing? First, what is contract brewing? Simplest way to put it is, let's say your local brewery down the road, microbrewery, brews 4 days a week. That means there's 3 days they're not brewing. A lot of these breweries, for additional income or whatever, will sell out that basically excess capacity. Now, there's two ways you can go about it. Let's say you are a home brewer and you always dreamed of having your own beer on the shelves. One of these days, and you created the greatest Doppelbock recipe in the history of mankind, but that's all you got. Well, you can go to that brewer, and once you file out other, you're going to have to get additional paperwork. When you get into the alcoholic beverage industry, if you ever have a dream of starting a brewery, a distillery, cidery, winery, what have you, be prepared for a ton of regulations. I've told you several times in some of these videos that I'd had my own spirits company one time, and the regulation is just unbelievable. But to get back to our sample, instead of you trying to cut all that red tape, you can go to that brewer, and either he lets you bring your own grain, hops, and everything, and use his equipment, or you could pay him to do the brewing for you. But you could create that one beer, and then you sell it straight instead of having, the brew pub where you have a whole kitchen staff, or trying to have the tasting room where you still probably need some kid to work, to bartend while you're brewing this, that, and the other. And instead of having all that build out, you could just make your beer and then try to sell it to the end customer. Whether you got a buddy that runs a bar that said he'd have it, or the guy that owns a liquor store. It'll make your life simpler. It'll make it cheaper. That money you would spend on things like, quick connect hoses, from your mash tun to your boil kettle, stuff like that. Extra fermenters, having to get a plumber to lay drains every X feet on the floor, stuff like that. You could save all that time and effort and put it more into your beer, or more into your marketing. A lot of people don't understand how important marketing is. They think, well, I'll just make the best beer possible and it just sells itself. I'll just have this famous beer snob will come in and love my beer and post it on Instagram. The rest is history. No, there's a lot of marketing done to it. There's a lot of hands-on, grinding the pavement kind of deal. And if using a contract brewer gives you more time and money to do that marketing, might be a better use of resources. Also, too, in my experience starting my company, I was literally encouraged by the TTB. I'd contact them about, well, hey, I want to do this. How would I do this? And after, several back and forths, the TTB agent told me, hey, there's companies that do this stuff for you, that contract you. You don't have to build a distillery. You don't have to build this out. They could do it, and they can still make a quality product and just shaved your life. And that's something when a regulator tells you, hey, there's an easier way. So I don't think it's a bad thing. That's the end question. Is this a good or bad thing? I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. If you work with a reputable brewer that knows their stuff, you two have created some kind of quality control. Maybe you go in every third batch to supervise. Maybe you're there all the time to supervise. Maybe maybe they help you find access to better ingredients. What have you. You can create the quality control without it necessarily being under your roof that you have to pay insurance for and utilities and this, that, and the other. So I don't think because someone uses contract brewing that means it's a bad product. So just my little rant on that. I'm against people getting too dogmatic on what craft beer is or should be. It should just be good beer, and we should just have fun. Speaking of which, let's have some fun and drink this Oktoberfest from Samuel Adams. All right, color-wise, this looks pretty much like their Boston Lager. We get about a little over a finger of light khaki head. All right, there's a little more to it on the nose than the Boston Lager. Let's give it a try. Oh, yeah, that's just a nice... That's just a nice, smooth, malty beer. Goes down easy. Because of it is a German-style beer, simply executed. We're not layering it with flavors or this, that, and the other. Just a nice malty beer. Body, I'm going to say medium minus. Finish, kind of a shorter finish. Doesn't linger. You're not getting much malts or hops on the nose or flavor, but there is, balanced beer. It is more malt forward beer, but it's not sweet in any way. Man, that is just a nice Oktoberfest. I can imagine just being on a patio somewhere, just knocking these back. A nice, solid, well-executed beer. If you like Oktoberfest beer, let me suggest the Oktoberfest from Samuel Adams. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or beers that you'd like me to try, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.